Mercury is the smallest planet in the solar system and the closest to the Sun, orbiting so tightly that a year there lasts just 88 Earth days. It is visible to the naked eye at dawn and dusk, a fast, faint point low on the horizon that ancient astronomers tracked with unusual persistence, given how briefly it appears. Every ancient astronomical tradition named it, tracked it, and assigned it significance. And modern planetary science has confirmed something that ancient astronomers could not have known through naked eye observation alone. Mercury is not the dead, static world it appears to be. It is a planet that has been physically shrinking for billions of years, and its surface still bears the scars of that contraction. Whether any authenticated ancient text describes this, and what the Book of Enoch's cosmological sections actually say about the innermost planets, is what this documentary examines honestly. The genuine science is remarkable, the genuine textual scholarship is interesting, and the line between what is authenticated and what is proposed needs to be clear throughout. Before we go further, subscribe now if this kind of historical and archaeological exploration is what you are here for. Every week, this channel examines ancient texts, scholarly debates, and interpretive questions at the edges of mainstream scholarship. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The fact that Mercury has physically shrunk over its history is a genuinely studied and genuinely significant area of planetary science, worth understanding accurately. As Mercury's molten iron interior slowly cooled after formation, the planet contracted, and its rigid outer crust had to buckle and fold to accommodate the smaller volume inside. This produced long, cliff-like features called lobate scarps, ridges where one section of crust was thrust up and over another as the surface crumpled inward. These scarps are found across Mercury's surface and are documented in imaging from both the Mariner 10 flyby in the 1970s and the Messenger orbiter, which mapped Mercury in detail between 2011 and 2015. Early estimates based on Mariner 10's partial coverage suggested Mercury's radius had shrunk by roughly 1 to 2 kilometers over its history. Messenger's complete global mapping revised that figure significantly upward. Current estimates place the total contraction at approximately 5 to 7 kilometers of radius, roughly 2 to 3 times larger than earlier models predicted. This is real history, extensively documented by NASA and by planetary geologists worldwide. The scarps themselves are visible in publicly available Messenger imagery, some more than 1,000 kilometers long and up to 3 kilometers high. Some of these scarps cut through impact craters and other surface features that are geologically young by solar system standards, which tells scientists that the contraction did not stop early in Mercury's history. Small-scale scarp formation may have continued into relatively recent geological time, and some researchers consider it possible that Mercury is still contracting today, extremely slowly, though this remains an active area of investigation rather than a settled conclusion. One of the more striking individual examples is a scarp system informally nicknamed by researchers for its scale, cutting across older cratered terrain in a way that shows the crust folding after the craters had already formed. Studies using Messenger's laser altimeter data have modeled the depth and steepness of these ridges to estimate how much horizontal shortening of the crust each one represents, then summed those estimates across the whole mapped surface to arrive at the global contraction figure. This kind of layered, cross-checked measurement, comparing crater ages, scarp geometry, and global topography together, is part of what makes the revised contraction estimate considered reliable by planetary geologists rather than a single isolated reading. The presence of water ice on Mercury is a real and extensively studied finding, and it remains one of the more counterintuitive results in planetary science. The planet closest to the Sun, with daytime surface temperatures reaching over 430 degrees Celsius, hosts frozen water. The explanation lies in Mercury's nearly zero axial tilt. Because Mercury's axis is barely tilted relative to its orbit, the floors of certain deep craters near its poles never receive direct sunlight at all. They exist in permanent shadow, and temperatures there stay low enough, in some cases below negative 170 degrees Celsius, to preserve water ice indefinitely. Earth-based radar observations first suggested bright, reflective deposits in these permanently shadowed polar craters in the 1990s. Messenger later confirmed this directly, using its neutron spectrometer to detect hydrogen concentrations consistent with water ice, and imaging the crater floors themselves, including deposits within Prokofiev crater near the North Pole, in some places bright enough to photograph directly at the edges of shadow. The leading explanation for the ice's origin involves a combination of impacts by comets and volatile-rich asteroids delivering water to Mercury over billions of years, along with the possibility that some water was released from Mercury's own interior. This remains an active area of research, and the relative contribution of each source is not fully resolved, though most researchers agree the ice has likely accumulated gradually over an extremely long span of Mercury's history, rather than arriving in a single event. The source material proposes that these permanently shadowed craters are described in the authenticated Enochic texts as sealed reservoirs kept in darkness by a stationed watcher, and that a Gay's passage in the Axum archive describes this connection explicitly. The passage described, from a section headed the words concerning Kokav Chama, the swift watcher of the innermost gate, corresponding to a fragment cluster designated 4Q Enoch M in Millick's unpublished notes, has not been confirmed in any peer-reviewed Enoch scholarship. The same fabricated manuscript apparatus that appeared in the Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn scripts appears here. This is noted for viewers who may be watching multiple videos from this source. The source material is accurate on one point. Kokav Chama is a genuine traditional Hebrew name for Mercury, literally meaning something close to star of the sun, a reference to how closely the planet hugs the sun in the sky and how briefly it is ever visible before or after sunset. Its use reflects ancient Near Eastern associations between Mercury and swiftness, messages, and transition. In Babylonian tradition, the planet was associated with Nabu, the god of writing, wisdom, and scribal record-keeping, and was tracked with particular care by Babylonian astronomers precisely because its rapid movement and brief visibility windows made it difficult to observe. This naming tradition is documented in mainstream scholarship on the history of ancient astronomy and in medieval Jewish astronomical texts building on earlier tradition. This is a genuine and interesting linguistic and cultural fact. What is not documented in mainstream Enoch scholarship or in any authenticated ancient text is the use of this name in a passage describing Mercury as a stationed guardian sealing reservoirs of water in darkness. The authentic name exists. The proposed passage using it does not appear in any verified manuscript. The Messenger mission produced genuine and significant scientific findings about Mercury's interior structure, findings that are worth presenting accurately. Gravity and topography measurements gathered by Messenger confirmed that Mercury's iron core is disproportionately large for a planet of its size. The core is estimated to make up roughly 85% of Mercury's radius, compared to about 55% for Earth's core relative to Earth's radius. In practical terms, Mercury is best described as a large metallic core wrapped in a comparatively thin rocky shell, the opposite proportion from most rocky planets. The mainstream explanation for this is debated among several competing hypotheses. One proposes that a giant impact early in Mercury's history stripped away much of its original rocky outer layer, leaving the core disproportionately dominant. Another proposes that intense early solar heating vaporized and blew away lighter surface material before the planet fully formed. A third suggests Mercury simply formed from unusually iron-rich material in that region of the early solar system. This is an active area of research, and no single explanation has been definitively confirmed over the others. Messenger's gravity data also revealed that at least part of Mercury's core remains molten today, which, combined with the planet's slow rotation, is thought to generate Mercury's surprisingly persistent global magnetic field, a field far weaker than Earth's but real and continuously measured by orbiting spacecraft. The source material proposes that the oversized core represents evidence of a presence, a physical entity stationed at the center of Mercury whose density accounts for the missing outer material. This interpretation is not one that Messenger mission scientists have proposed or endorsed. It is an alternative interpretation of real data that mainstream planetary science does not support. The astronomical Book of First Enoch, chapters 72 through 82, with Aramaic fragments at Qumran dated to the 3rd century BCE, describes the sun, moon, and stars within a structured gate system administered by angelic beings. It is a text focused primarily on the solar and lunar cycles and the 364-day calendar controversy discussed in previous documentaries in this series. The astronomical book does not, in its authenticated content, as published by Ephraim Isaac in 1983 and analyzed by James Vanderkam and George Nicholsburg in published commentary, describe Mercury specifically as a stationed guardian sealing reservoirs in permanent darkness. The planet Mercury appears in ancient Jewish astronomical and astrological tradition as Kokav Shama, but the specific framework of a stationed sentinel guarding sealed ice does not appear in any authenticated Enoch manuscript in the form described in the source material. What is genuine within the Enochic cosmological tradition? The text does describe a cosmos with structure, administration, and active divine management. It does describe angelic beings assigned to specific functions in the heavenly order, including gates governing the movement of celestial bodies. It does describe the possibility of cosmic disruption when that administration is withdrawn. These are genuine and documented features of the authenticated text. What requires fabricated manuscripts to support? The specific claim that Mercury is identified in an axiom-restricted passage as a stationed watcher of the innermost gate, that its permanently shadowed craters are called sealed reservoirs, and that its contracting surface is described as a sign of the final generation. None of these claims appear in any authenticated manuscript. The Messenger mission's exploration of Mercury between 2011 and 2015 is one of the most significant planetary science achievements of the modern era, and is worth engaging with on its own terms. Messenger was the first spacecraft to orbit Mercury, after a series of flybys beginning in 2008 that required an extraordinarily complex gravity-assisted trajectory to slow the spacecraft enough to be captured by Mercury's weak gravity so close to the Sun's own gravitational pull. Over 4 years in orbit, it produced the first complete global map of Mercury's surface, confirmed the extent of the planet's contraction through its scarp mapping, confirmed water ice in the permanently shadowed polar craters, and measured the disproportionate size of the planet's iron core. The mission ended deliberately in April 2015, when Messenger's fuel was exhausted and controllers allowed it to descend and impact Mercury's surface, adding one final, small crater to a planet whose surface tells the story of billions of years of impacts and contraction. The data and imagery from the mission are publicly available and have been extensively published, and a second mission, the European-Japanese Bepi-Colombo spacecraft, launched in 2018 and entered Mercury orbit in 2026 to build on these findings with more advanced instruments than Messenger carried. Whether Mercury's contraction was engineered or monitored by an intelligence stationed at its core, as the source material proposes, is a claim with no evidential basis in astronomy. The planet's thermal history and interior structure are understood within standard models of rocky planet formation and cooling. What can be independently verified? Mercury has physically contracted by approximately 5 to 7 kilometers of radius over its history, documented through lobate scarps mapped by Mariner 10 and Messenger. Water ice exists in permanently shadowed polar craters, confirmed by Messenger's neutron spectrometer and direct imaging of deposits, including those in Prokofiev crater. Mercury's iron core makes up roughly 85% of its radius, an unusually large proportion confirmed by Messenger's gravity data. Part of that core remains molten and generates a real, measured global magnetic field. Kokov Chama is a genuine ancient name for Mercury with documented Hebrew usage. What has not been independently verified? The axiom-restricted passage describing Mercury as a stationed watcher of the innermost gate. The 4Q Enoch M fragment designation. Millick's private notes referencing this passage. Any authenticated Enoch text connecting Mercury's polar ice or shrinking surface to a watcher whose sealing or weakening signals the final age. What mainstream planetary science establishes differently. Mercury's contraction is explained through cooling and crustal buckling, as the planet's molten interior solidified over billions of years. Its oversized core is explained through competing giant impact, solar stripping, or formation composition hypotheses. Its polar ice is explained through cometary and asteroidal delivery, combined with possible interior outgassing. None of these explanations involve stationed entities. The genuine story of Mercury is remarkable on its own terms. The smallest and innermost planet, close enough to the Sun that its dayside temperatures can melt lead, and yet holding frozen water in permanent shadow just kilometers away. A surface still visibly folding under the pressure of a planet-wide contraction that may not have fully stopped. A core so large relative to the planet's size that Mercury is, structurally, mostly metal wearing a thin stone shell. And the genuine story of the Book of Enoch's cosmological tradition is also remarkable on its own terms. A structured cosmos with active divine administration, astronomical knowledge encoded in religious literature with unusual precision, and a tradition of engagement with questions about what the heavens are and what they do that has never been adequately integrated into Western scholarship. Both of these are worth knowing. They do not require fabricated manuscripts connecting them to each other to be interesting.